Hello and welcome back to GoodKnitKisses. I'm your host Kristen, and today we are going to talk about the knit stitch on needles. Let's go ahead and get started. Be sure to check out the video for casting on. We're going to insert our needle knitwise into the first stitch, which is underneath this loop here, and we are going to yarn over, pull through our loop with our right needle, and then we're going to pull it off. I'm really exaggerating this. Okay, that's really all that you're doing. Okay, so it's not necessary to be that loose. We're going to put our needle in knitwise, yarn over, pull the loop through, and pull off this left needle. So just letting it drop off. We're transferring these loops over to here, but when we yarn over, it actually makes a stitch for that next row. We're going to pull this through. So it's just like casting on video, except now what we're doing is letting that loop drop off. And don't worry, because you created over here, and the new stitch that's yarning over, this creates a stitch here. Let's try that again. Yarn over, pull that loop through, let it drop off, put the needle in, yarn over, pull the loop through, let it fall off. If you can cast on, gosh, yeah, if you can cast on like 20 stitches, you're going to get a really good rhythm going before even having to turn your work. Oops, see, now I've dropped it. Just going to knit that over. And I've said in another video, I'm actually, I'd still consider myself a beginner needle knitter, haha. That's why I'm filming this like this right now, because I just want to show you that you can start at any place and any point. I don't do as much needle knitting because I have carpal tunnel, and it's harder on my hands, so I don't do it as long. But I've had people want me to do some videos on it, so we're doing at the level that I can do. And we're not worrying about technique and how you hold the yarn, because you'll find your own rhythm. Oops. Okay. I'm going to take my work and turn it over. I'm going to insert our needle knitwise. Hold back this straggler piece if you like. Yarn over, and we're going to pull that loop and pull the other one off. Yarning over, knitting. So you can push these stitches up here to make it easier on you. Just kind of keep working these stitches over to the right. Now what this is doing is you are turning your work every time. So let's say your first row was a knit stitch. The first row is the right side, and when you turn your work, it makes it that you're working on the back side. So if you continue the knit stitch, it's going to make a garter stitch for you. The back of a knit stitch is always a purl. So if you do a knit stitch when you turn your work onto the back, then a purl is going to be on what's called the right side. And if you keep turning your work, you're going to have a knit and a purl and a knit and a purl, and that creates a garter row. In loom knitting, if you're familiar with my channel, loom knitting, in order to make a garter stitch row, or ridge, you have to actually change the stitch up the way that you make it. You have to physically make a purl stitch. But here we've done that. We made a purl bump. So here we're going to continue here again. In order to make a knit fabric, oops, sorry, I keep hitting my table. In order to make a knit fabric, it's all knit rows continuously. Either if you're doing a circular hat or something like that and continue with the knit stitch in the round, then you are going to continue to get a knit stitch. But because we're turning our work, you will have to learn how to make a purl stitch on the needles in order to get a continuous knit stitch for flat panel. So tune into my next video and I will show you how to make the purl stitch. But for now, I suggest that you knit at least 4 inches to show what this looks like. And as always with any knitting and loom knitting, when you make a stitch and you start learning, you need to make at least a 4x4 swatch whenever you're going to do something that requires gauge, and we can talk about that another time. But really, to get a feel for it, you really need to keep going and make a bigger piece. And don't worry if your stitches are wonky at first. You're learning, and your gauge isn't going to be as even. You may find that you knit too loose or too tight, and you'll get a rhythm and get better at it. And the best first projects to do are scarves for people, because you just keep knitting, and then you can learn how to continue doing the same stitch over and over again. And then you can do a pot holder and stuff, but we will beware if you use a cotton, then it's going to be tighter. So I would suggest using a wool, because it's a lot easier to work with. So I'm going to continue knitting, and I will see you back in a few minutes and you'll see what I've made. Pause your video and I'll see you in a minute. Okay, I just wanted to show you more of what this garter stitch row looks like, and that way you can get a good idea. It's best to look at it after you've done several rows of it, not when you've first started, because the rows are skewed, and if you spread out your stitches, you can see, because it starts growing on you. Okay, so we have a cast on row at this cast on edge here, and then we have the first knit row here. And then this is a purl bump. And then the next time we create our knit stitch, and then a purl, and then a knit and a purl, it will create these ridges. So this is a ridge. So you've got 4 ridges that we've made. This is the last row here. You see these bumps here? This is what a purl bump looks like. So on this last row, I just now flipped this over, but when I ended, I was like this. So I did a knit stitch back here on the front side when I was over here, and then when I flip this around, you can see the back, and it has a purl bump. This is about 17 stitches, and again, this is a 15 size needle and a chunky yarn here. So just wanted you to see what that looks like, and tune in for the next video on a purl stitch. Before I go, I just wanted to show you, whenever you see your tail on the left side of the work, then you'll know that this is the right side. It sounds funny, but this is the correct side to look at. And so when the tail is on the left, this is the correct side to look at, and when it's flipped over, the tail will be on the right, and it will be the back side. And the way to remember is, whenever you were casting on, this tail kept moving to the left. So when I cast it on, all these stitches keep growing and growing, and then it's on the left. So and then when you started your first row and you start all these knits here, your tail remains on the left. When you turn it on the back side, the tail ends up on this side over here. So just wanted to point that out. Thanks for joining me at Good Knit Kisses, and stay tuned for the next videos on purling and more. Happy knitting!